Why does it seem like the public is, at this point, being purposely misled or being treated like we have the intelligence of a 5-year-old? It is truly mind-boggling. It is mind-boggling for me, 1, for Charlie's family, 2, for the honor of Charlie, and 3, for the fact that we are a nation who understands guns very well. Now, like I said before, I'm going to do an entire breakdown of everything involved with them. But we've all been looking for the answers as far as, was this an exit wound? If it was, where is the entry? Who actually shot him? Was the guy on the roof actually the guy? If he was, why was he running off the roof with no apparent gun in his hand? Oh, he took it apart. Because that makes sense when you're trying to get away from a murder scene. You're going to sit there on the roof and take your gun apart just so you can put it in your backpack. And then you're going to reassemble it and dump it in the woods just so whenever they find it, it looks picture perfect.
We loved Charlie Kirk. We admired his voice, we argued with it, we followed it, but love or belief doesn't mean silence when the facts don't add up. Tonight we promise something simple and unambiguous. We will not look away until the truth is known. If you want to follow every twist and demand answers with us, subscribe now and turn on notifications, because this is the moment we refuse to accept a tidy ending that doesn't fit the evidence. Right away, there are 5 stubborn, uncomfortable facts that demand a re-examination. First, the bullet recovered from Charlie's body behaves like a clue that points in the wrong direction. Second, the wound and trajectory investigators have described don't mesh cleanly with a shooter perched high on a rooftop. Third, multiple eyewitnesses insist the sound of the shot came from very close, almost on top of the stage. Fourth, surveillance, audio, and camera feeds that should have clarified everything are incomplete, delayed, or went dark at key moments. And fifth, someone else was briefly detained and released in the hours after the shooting, a blind spot that, so far, has never been fully explained. Put those 5 facts together and you don't have a solved puzzle. You have a puzzle someone wants you to stop solving. Let's start with the single most objective, least disputable piece of evidence, the bullet itself. Forensic ballistics is simple in principle. The barrel of a gun leaves microscopic striations on the surface of a bullet, a fingerprint that can be compared to a specific weapon. If the bullet recovered from a victim doesn't match the firearm presented as the murder weapon, that is not a minor footnote. It is the hinge on which the whole case swings. Those who have studied the medical imaging and read the early forensic notes in this case say the recovered round does not carry the expected match to the rifle investigators recovered. The bullet was recovered lodged in soft tissue with no straightforward exit wound. That detail alone is unusual for a high-powered rifle fired from a distance and should have prompted a deeper, public forensic discussion immediately. Instead, the rifle was shown to reporters like a trophy, and the narrative moved on. The science that connects the bullet to that specific barrel, the match under the comparison microscope, is the moment that either closes a case or opens a new one. Where is that moment in the public record? Why were the details around that test not front and center? Next, the path of the wound. If a shooter fires from an elevated rooftop, the expected trajectory into the victim's body is angled downward. Certain internal damage patterns and exit wounds typically follow. Medical staff and independent experts reviewing the imaging have flagged that the path of the round in this instance looks forward, possibly from behind or level with the stage, not down from above. That inconsistency is not an argument over opinion. It is a direct contradiction between what would be expected from the official rooftop scenario and what the physical evidence seems to say. Listen to the witnesses. Multiple people in the crowd, ordinary attendees, parents, students, reported a sound that was immediate, nearby, and startlingly close. Several frontline witnesses said they saw movement behind the stage just before Charlie collapsed. Others described the sound as a shock less like an echo from distance and more like something fired close to the crowd, where the pressure and Doppler cues would be unmistakable. If those accounts are accurate, they don't just add texture to the event. They force us to ask whether the fatal shot came from where investigators initially claimed, or whether the origin was somewhere much closer. Now consider the cameras and microphones that were in place. This was a public event with sightlines and recording devices everywhere. There should have been raw feeds, backup files, mic test recordings, and a paper trail of who handled the equipment. Instead, certain camera angles are missing or incomplete. Some feeds were delayed before release. One critical rooftop feed reportedly glitched at the exact moment everyone needed it to be working. Audio tracks that could be triangulated to pinpoint origin have not been made public. Whether this was technical error or something more deliberate, the practical result is the same. The one set of records that could confirm or refute a rooftop shooter's position is not available for public review, and that gap fuels suspicion. An equally urgent question centers on a person who appeared and then disappeared in the official record. In the chaos after the shooting, a different individual was briefly detained, questioned off the record, and then released with no formal booking or follow-up publicly explained. Eyewitnesses recall his presence. Rumors attach motives. Police procedural records, however, remain scant. Why was one name released to the press and paraded in headlines while another person who was briefly in custody vanished from the official story? When someone is detained and then released without a paper trail, there are only two comforting possibilities. Either the detainment was a mistaken identity that was immediately corrected and documented, or it was something more complicated that someone decided to keep quiet. Neither scenario is reassuring unless the documentation appears and the public can see why the decision was made. We must also address the timeline and the speed of the public narrative. In the hours after the tragedy, the case was publicly presented as solved. A single suspect was rounded up and soon became the face of the story. There is a natural human desire for order after chaos, to name a suspect, to feel safer. But justice depends not on comfort but on rigor. The speed of the narrative closure here coincided with important forensic and digital explanations being withheld, delayed, or never fully explained to the public. That sequence raises the question, why so fast? What pressure exists inside the system to trade complete disclosure for rapid reassurance? Digital evidence, the kind that either proves or upends a story, deserves a careful look. Phone pings, GPS logs, and cell tower connections can create a timeline that is extremely difficult to dispute. In other cases, they have placed suspects away from scenes or corroborated witness accounts with cold data. In this matter, several signals about the suspect's location at crucial times are ambiguous and, according to defense filings, contradictory to the simplest rooftop shooter scenario. If properly reviewed and publicly documented, these records can either reinforce the official case or force its revision. The issue is transparency. The public has seen only fragments, and those fragments raise as many questions as they answer. Importantly, motive and messaging do not equal guilt. Angry messages, political hatred, or online venting are all very real phenomena, and they matter in understanding state of mind. But they do not, on their own, prove who fired the shot in a crowded arena. Messages can be emotionally raw, exaggerated, or even planted. They can be misinterpreted when taken out of context. Forensic proof must remain the lodestar. Ballistics, trajectory, camera logs, metadata from devices. Those are the tools that decide whether a narrative holds or collapses. What happens if the bullet doesn't match the rifle, if the trajectory is inconsistent with a rooftop shot, and if key cameras and feeds are missing? Then the simplest explanation, that one lone rooftop shooter was the whole story, stops being viable. A case like that demands either an immediate, independent re-examination of the physical evidence and the chain of custody, or it exposes a dangerous possibility that the wrong man has been made to stand as the public face of a crime while the person who actually fired the fatal round remains free. This isn't academic. If the system gets a major case wrong, the costs ripple outward. The convicted or imprisoned lose their life, family, and future. The real perpetrator, if free, remains capable of further violence. Public trust in investigative agencies erodes. And the very idea that justice is blind becomes a distant memory replaced by the idea that justice can be performed for optics. So what must happen next? First, we need immediate, independent ballistics testing with all results made public. The bullet recovered from Charlie's body must be re-examined, in an open, verifiable setting, compared again to any and all firearms recovered or linked to the scene. The chain of custody for every piece of evidence needs to be posted and verified. Second, all raw footage and audio, every single camera feed, drone recording, and microphone track, must be preserved and released for independent review. Third, a transparent accounting of anyone detained in the hours after the event must be produced. If an individual was pulled aside and released, the official record must explain why. Fourth, cell phone metadata, GPS logs, and timestamp records that bear on key movements should be available to accredited, independent reviewers, balanced with privacy protections where appropriate. Fifth, the court process must be allowed to proceed with full disclosure, not sealed threads, to prevent the public narrative from being shaped by selective leaks. A fair, independent review will be painful and politically costly. It will unsettle people who have already grieved. It will force uncomfortable conversations about whether speed trumped accuracy. But if the goal is truth, that cost is necessary. It is cheaper to pay that cost now than to pay for a future built on a lie. Let's be candid about the possibilities. One scenario is that the initial forensics were accurate and that the perceived mismatches were misunderstandings of technical detail, mistakes that can be corrected and explained. That would be the best possible outcome: transparency, correction, and a secure conviction based on verified tests. The other scenario is darker, that the wrong facts were amplified, that evidence was mishandled or hidden, and that optics were prioritized over inquiry. That outcome would demand the strongest possible corrective action: independent oversight, criminal review of any cover-up, and the reopening of any prosecutorial decisions made on incomplete evidence. For those who want certainty, for those who seek closure, here's what we are absolutely certain of at this point. The questions are real. The questions are credible. The questions are consequential. They are not fringe theories. They are the natural response of a system trained to rely on proof. When a bullet and a barrel do not match, when witnesses give consistent accounts that differ from the official line, when cameras that should have been definitive are missing or dark, the only responsible course is to pause, to test, and to disclose. We must also be careful. There is a difference between investigating and accusing. We are not announcing a verdict from this platform. We are demanding transparency. We are asking for full tests, full records, and full access for independent experts. We are saying plainly, if the evidence demonstrates Tyler Robinson's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, let that evidence be shown and the verdict stand. If it does not, then justice requires that the public know why a man was made the face of a case that does not fit the facts. To the family and friends of Charlie Kirk, no promise of truth can remove your grief. But you deserve the truth, not a tidy story. To the investigators and officials, we do not seek to undermine you for the sake of spectacle. We seek clarity because clarity protects the innocent and convicts the guilty. To the public, this is not about political sides. It is about facts and the institutions that rely on them. There are practical next steps every citizen can demand. Call for an independent panel composed of neutral ballistics experts, medical examiners, and digital forensics analysts. Demand the release of the raw files, every camera angle, every audio track, every drone clip, every mic check. Ask for a transparent chain of custody record for every physical item labeled as evidence. Insist that any person briefly detained have their encounter documented and disclosed. And require that prosecution decisions be grounded publicly in the forensic roadmap that led to them. If you care about truth, if you fear that a rushed narrative can destroy lives and allow a real killer to remain free, then this is the moment to raise your voice. Insist on independent review. Ask questions. Share credible findings, not rumor. Support rigorous journalism that follows the paper trail. Demand that institutions remember their first duty is to facts, not to optics. We must close with the human measure. Charlie Kirk was more than a headline or a political figure. He was a person loved by family and friends. They deserve answers. The public deserves trust. The system that prosecutes must be beyond question or it breaks. This is about justice for a man who will not return, and justice for any person wrongly accused. We will keep following this. We will press for the tests and the transparency that have not yet been given. We will amplify credible expert voices, publish the results of independent reviews, and hold up the documents that the public has a right to see. If the evidence proves Tyler Robinson guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, we will say so. If the evidence shows he was not the shooter, We will demand accountability for the mistakes that put a man at the center of a crime he did not commit. Either way, truth must be the outcome. If you want to be part of holding the system accountable, subscribe, share this video, and demand that the raw evidence be released. Leave comments with specific questions you want answered, and we will push every one of them. Above all, be relentless in the pursuit of facts. Love for someone lost demands no less. Thank you for listening. We will return as new evidence surfaces, and until then we will keep asking the same hard questions until the public record finally gives us answers.